What's up, everybody? Chicago Goonie here, bringing you another Arsenal talk. In this Arsenal talk, I'm just going to cover some of the major news that have been coming out over the last few days about, Mahrez, Lacazette, even Mustafi is being linked to us as well. Center back from Valencia, who is German. You probably saw him in the Euros. 24-year-old center back, has a ton of potential. It would be a great signing for Arsenal. He would, you could probably line him up right next to Koss almost immediately. You could even make, a Gabriel the substitute. Let him keep on learning. Let him keep on learning the English language and whatnot, and try to fight for a position. Start really studying, maybe, hopefully, and everything like that. But that would be a great signing as well. Um, but again, we only have so much money. Yes, we have a ton of it, but we only have so much money. Let's say we do get Mahrez and Lacazette. That is easily, 45 to 50 million euros for Lacazette, 45 to 50 million euros for Mahrez. And if you're really looking at it, on a pound standpoint, it's probably around, I would say around like 80, 81 million pounds, which we do have, by the way. It's just, we have a ton of money just sitting in the bank. Supposedly we have 159 million pounds sitting in the bank, the most of any club in the world. I think it's more than that. It has to be more than that. They were projecting that we had 200 million in the bank before the Chaka signing, and then we got paid out from the BPL. Of course, we got 100 million from that. Um, you know, who knows when the commercial deal with Puma kicks in every year? That's another about 50 million. Um, so honestly, we probably have around. We probably could have anywhere around like 250 sitting in the bank, just collecting dust, collecting interest. Kind of like obviously the way they want it to be for some odd reason. Um, but Ivan Gazidis came out today. By the time you listen to this, it might be before the MLS All Star game or it might be after. Just depends on when I can upload this. But he comes out and says that Arsenal can't outgun our rivals. Which is obviously a joke. Like I said in my last video, this guy keeps on walking into a PR nightmare. He keeps on saying the wrong things. You know, is that some type of PR stunt to get out there in the media to tell the likes of Leon or Leicester City that quote unquote we don't have that much money to spend, which is a fucking joke because the numbers are out there. Even if it is only just 159 million, we have enough money to spend. You're looking at Manchester United, who had more than us before they started signing everybody. They had, I think, about like 10 or 15 million more at the end of the year. This was before they started signing people and whatnot. And, you're looking at that and they're going out and spending. You're looking at Juventus. They never spend like that. They're going out and spending. People are starting to finally realize the inflation and what you need to do to win. What you need to do to win the league, win Champions League, be competitive in Champions League. It's kind of ridiculous when you look at the broad numbers and what we have and what Ivan Gazidis says we don't have, and it is ridiculous. There's so many financial geeks out there that look at the finances of Arsenal. One notable gunner is the Swiss Ramble. If you haven't, I'm sure you're following him on Twitter and whatnot. He's really heavy into Arsenal's financial, their bank book, for a long time now. For at least first time I discovered them was back in like 2011, 2010 or something like that. That's when Twitter really started booming back then, around like '09 or in 10. And he was doing the books ever since then. Getting any type of information that you can get, excuse me, that's obviously free, public record, public records. Holy shit! And he's been keeping track of all this stuff. Wages, what the yearly amount to run the club. To pay all the people behind the scenes that we have no idea who they are. All the office people. All the scouts and whatnot, coaches, youth academy, what it takes. So what are the wages there to let the youth academy run smoothly. All that. He has all that type of information, and he keeps on posting on Twitter and everything. He's basically like one of the guys that you look towards when you talk about Arsenal finances. But long story short, we have the money. We deserve this. We definitely deserve this. This is what we've been promised by Arsene Wenger, by Ivan Gazidis, and even by Stan Kroenke himself. Once we have the funds, once we get ourselves out of debt, out of bad debt, we'll always have debt, especially towards the Emirates, but it's good debt. Good debt is basically when you can pay something off, um, you know, long term, to where our bad debt is something short term. And according to Arsenal themselves, we squashed all of our bad debt 2 years ago. That was one of their winter reports when the new year hit. I believe it was either 2014, 2015. They came out with an article saying that we have zero bad debt. That's huge. But once we have the money, we can start competing with these big clubs. We can start signing these players. Transfer fees are not going to be something that's going to hold us back. Because if you really look at it, transfer fees themselves, of how they work out, it's, you might see, like the Pogba deal, it might be in excess of 120 million euros. Okay, Manchester United doesn't pay that 120 million euros immediately. It doesn't happen like that. That's why clubs can continuously, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, City, PSG. That's why they can do these big money deals, because you pay out in a long time. Like this 120 million euros could be paid out in, say, 5 or 6 years. That's basically, 4 to 5 years is basically the payout for an entire transfer fee. I mean, that's like the bare minimum is 4 to 5 years. Sometimes it can even extend, so that a club like even ours, we're still getting paid off for Cesc Fabregas. I mean, just you know, think about it that way. That we're still getting paid off from Cesc Fabregas from Barcelona. Even a couple years, even when he joined Chelsea a couple years ago, that information came out that we're still getting paid by them. So clubs do this so they can keep on having income, and massive amounts of income continuously come in from other clubs. Of course, that's it's part of the revenue. It's part of the the outline of the income that comes into a football club, and of course that transfer fee goes into wages, keeping the grounds, everything that runs the club. It helps, it continuously runs the club, and the buybacks of the banks, of the loans that we get through that and whatnot. It's all here nor there. Um, but again, we have the money. So what if Lacazette costs 50 million euros? Say they do a tree of 5 years. That's 10 million euros a year for Lacazette. And if you really look at Lacazette, yeah, he's probably going to be with the club for, if we do buy him, for the next 5 or 6 years. Imagine all the T-shirt sales, all the sales that he'll get just for his jerseys and loan and everything. When that next Puma deal comes up, we can say, you know what, we want 70 million euros per year for this deal. And if you say no, fine, we'll go to Adidas, we'll go to Nike. Puma's gonna pay. Puma's gonna pay that. Especially when we have 100 million strong Arsenal fans scattered across the world. So you buy Mahrez, another 50 million euros. That's 10 million a year. What's the big deal? It's a parking ticket. It's a few match days for Arsenal. Then you look at all the commercial deals that we have, all the new deals that we have. Money continuously keeps on flowing into the club, and that's the purpose of it. But at the same time, it's not the purpose to just let it sit there and collect interest. The only reason that companies do that, where they have cash reserves, a huge amount of cash reserves, is possibly to sell the company. Because when you have, say, 200 million pounds in cash reserves, you can even double and triple that on the sale of a company because that money's already there. But they can two and three times it and say, look, we have 200 million pounds in cash reserves. Because if you sold Arsenal now, I mean, I'm doing this in terms of, they're almost worth $2 billion, I believe. I think it's either 1.9 million dollars in U.S. dollars, or it's 2.1 billion dollars right now. They could easily sell the club for, three and a half million dollars U.S. right now, just because of the cash reserves and the potential of the club to keep on generating cash flow into the club. And of course, when you're one of the biggest clubs in the world, you have, the Emirates Stadium, 60,000 plus. You have Champions League, you have FA Cup, you have anything. All the competitions, League Cup, of course, 38 game or not 38 games, 19 games in home games in the Premier League that will always sell out as long as we have a great product to show. We deserve this. There's not a single excuse that Ivan Gazidis or Arsene Wenger can use that we don't deserve this as fans. We've backed them for so many years. We've let them get away with murder. This is the time. This is the time to see Granit Xhaka, Mahrez, and Lacazette all in the same window, because this is what we were promised. Great players, world-class players, potentially all in the same window. This is what we were promised. Not just one player per fucking window, or not one great difference maker per window, because you need more than that now. When you're seeing the likes of Manchester United beef up, you're seeing Chelsea beef up. Liverpool is even kind of beefing up. I mean, they're not making great signings. They're not making world-class signings because they really have nothing to offer, but they're still making good signings. And we need to keep up with the Joneses. We can't just sit, we can't keep on saying Ox has so much potential. We can't say that Ramsey is going to find his 13-14 form. We can't keep on sit here and saying that Theo Walcott's going to find his 12 and 13 form again. We can't do that. We can't keep on doing that. Because as far as I'm concerned, for the last few years, those players have not repaid Arsene Wenger a bit. They haven't gotten better. They've gotten worse. They don't progress. They regress. So the time is now. If you need to send a few players out the door, obviously if we get Mahrez, that means it's the end of either Theo Walcott, Joel Campbell for sure, probably. He would probably be the first one out the door. And then the Ox, this would be his last year. This would be his last opportunity to prove himself that he can play at this level, play at this big club, and produce. But when you're looking at a guy like Mahrez who can just produce, who has all the skills to be a world-class winner, that missing element, that missing piece, along with Lacazette of another striker with Giroud, to give you that pace, to give you that finishing, to give you that something different. I don't know what the rotation will be, but, who cares? As long as we have that option. We need that option. I mean, we can't go into the league starting Sinogo up top, or starting Akpom up top, or telling Theo Walcott, oh, here's a couple games until Giroud gets back. That's ridiculous. Big clubs should never operate like that. When you're looking at a total, like I said in my last video, it's probably going to be anywhere from 90 to 95 million euros, maybe even 100 million euros at the end of the day for those two players. But will it be worth it in the long run? Absolutely. Mahrez is still young. Lacazette's in his prime. Mahrez, I think, it just entered his prime. I think what 25. What's prime? Prime 26, 25. It's when someone enters their prime, and then they end their prime around 31, 32, something around there. And with the evolution of sports science and whatnot, you're going to start seeing players play beyond, their prime years and play and still be able to contribute. So it's a win-win for us. Mares is already BPL proven. Lacazette, maybe you'll need, obviously give him half a season to really settle in. But the fact that we already have, French players on the team, a French manager, it should be really easy for him to settle in. I don't know if he speaks English because I check his Twitter periodically to see what he has to say, and it's all in French. So I don't know if he can speak English or not. I would imagine he does because the English language is basically kind of like the second language of the world. But it's a win-win. You know, Leon is playing hardball. We made our first. Supposedly today there was a second bid for Lacazette of 44 million euros, which is a hike up from, it's about, it was like 7.9 million pounds more than what we offered was our first bid. The first bid's always going to get rejected no matter what, unless you make some kind of like ridiculous offer. But the first bid's always going to get rejected no matter what, even if it's in the ballpark of what the team actually wants. The team actually, the selling team wants to get every single penny that they can get. So it's going to get rejected anyway. So if they can get another million or 2 million out of them, they'll hold out for an extra few days just to get that. You know. But then there's some tweets out there that says if we bid 50 million euros for Lacazette, he's ours. That's the rumor. That's the rumor coming out of Lyon. That's a rumor that a lot of I guess respected or reliable sources have said on Twitter over this last about 12 hours or so. I think it'll get close to that. I think Arsenal will probably finally stand tall and say this is our final offer, 48 million euros, take it or leave it. And Leon's gonna finally sit there and say, okay, well, what's 2 million? Fine, let's get him out and let's bring someone else in. And then with Mahrez almost, there's a lot of conflicting reports because Leicester City is currently in the United States. They flew here over the weekend, I believe. There's a number of photos out there of the Leicester City, um, all the players that were on the plane, and he wasn't in the picture. Everybody else was, but him. So there's that. Um, there's some reports saying that Ranieri is trying to contact him, and he can't get a hold of Mahrez, supposedly. Um, these are all allegations. Of course, Mahrez is keeping his mouth shut. He's not saying anything. So that's kind of good for us that he has yet to say that he wants to stay at Leicester City or if he wants to leave. Usually if a player says he's staying, he'll say it, instead of going through this whole kind of media drama because every time he comes up to a reporter, anytime he sees an Arsenal fan somewhere, they're gonna ask him, "Are you coming to Arsenal? Are you coming to Arsenal? Or, are you going to Arsenal?" You have to keep on dealing with that stuff. So his silence is good for us. Lacazette still hasn't said anything either. He supposedly told Leon early in the summer that he wants to leave. Even up to a week ago, there was a report saying that he wants to leave. So that's good for us. Once a player says nothing at all, that's really good for us because usually if a player is loyal, he'll come out and say it. Go back to the Ozil summer. Um, the entire summer, Cesc Fabregas was linked to us. He didn't say a fucking word up until, God, early August. mid-August saying that he was going to stay and fight for his position in Barcelona. It took him almost like 2.5 months to actually come out and say something. So just think of that. He had 2.5 months to say something. If he didn't want to go in the first place, he should have said it right off the bat. But he never did. Even in interviews, he never said a word about it. So that's good for us right now. So we have to think about that. We have to look at that, and hopefully that is true. Hopefully we get one of those guys. There's a lot of people are asking, if you had to choose between Mahrez and Lacazette, man, that's tough. Maybe it's not so tough when you look at our right wingers, when you look at the Ox, who I think doesn't even have 10 BPL 10 BPL goals to his name, and he's been playing for us for the last 4 or 5 years. You're looking at a Theo Walcott who doesn't defend, sometimes is lazy, sometimes doesn't have the endurance to really push himself to become that great player. You look at Joel Campbell, but I can't say anything bad about him, obviously. I mean, that poor kid. He gives his heart every time he's on the pitch. He gives that heart and desire. He does defend. He does track back. I'm not saying the Ox doesn't track back, because he does, but I can't really even say a bad thing about him. But you look at that production, and there's nothing there. There's nothing consistent enough there. So you're thinking, if you place Mahrez right into that mold, I mean, that's nuts. That's crazy to me. Because you add in Champions League football and whatnot. He had 17 goals, I believe, in all competitions last year. Didn't have Champions League. I think they got knocked out fairly early of the FA Cup, fairly early of the League Cup. That's 17 goals that Arsenal can use on that wing. He had another 11 assists or something through all competitions. That's 11 assists that we need from that right wing. Imagine all the goals that Alexis Sanchez is going to get from his production. Now you're not going to see 2 or 3 players surrounding Alexis Sanchez all the time. 2 or 3 players surrounding Mesut Ozil at all times. You're going to see defenses get confused of who they actually defend, because let's be honest, they're not afraid of the Ox. They're not afraid of Theo Walcott. So that would almost be like an instant impact, because you wouldn't need 3, 4, 6 months for the player to settle in. Lacazette was supposed to be our 5th option. Supposedly, that's what Arsene Wenger said himself. He was the 5th option in our transfer search, which is, obviously we probably could have had Higuain if we really wanted to pay out the buyout clause. But you're looking at Morata, Vardy, obviously. What is that? 3. Who was the 4th? Icardi was possibly the 4th, and then now Lacazette is the 5th. But then you're looking at Lacazette. He has that pace, has that, loses the ball sometimes, but he still has, he can still make a yard or two. He's the opposite of Giroud, basically. He's a smaller, he's small, and he's like 5'9", 5'10". But he can make a yard of space for himself. He can dribble. He can dribble past players. He doesn't have the same passing skills, I would say, as Giroud, but at the same time, who cares? That's not what I want on my striker. I want goals out of my striker, and that's what he can produce. Someone did a graph today on Reddit where it showed the last 3 seasons, and Lacazette has scored more goals than him, or than Giroud, Lukaku, Icardi, all of them. Of all the people that we're after, except for Higuain. Higuain, of course, he's off the board. but he scored 65 goals over the last 3 seasons, I believe. That's more than Giroud, 61. And Giroud has had more games when you include Champions League. Lacazette just got into Champions League last season, and they didn't make it past the group stage. And I don't even know if he played every game because I know he was hurt for a couple months, I believe, too. So you're looking at all the extra games that Giroud has had. He's only scored 61 goals over the last 3 seasons. That's, that's what I want Lacazette, because he can produce goals. That's what we need. But at the end of the day, we should have both. We have the money. If Arsene Wenger is a man of his word, when he flat out says every single summer, if the quality is there, if the player is available, I will buy him no matter what. It doesn't matter of the transfer fee. Well, these two players are there for the taking. It's now or never. Because if you really look at this, I mean, this is the other point that I want to make out of buying these two players. You buy Lacazette and Mahrez in this window. Next year, you don't have to buy shit. You really don't have to buy anything. Maybe you buy a center half. Maybe you buy another midfielder to make up. Maybe if Santi Gazzola leaves or not. What do you really have to buy? Because the stage is then set for the next 3 or 4 years. Chaka's 23. Ozil has still about 5 years left in him. Sanchez probably still has about 4 or 5 good years left in him. Lacazette has 5 to 6. Mahrez will have 7, 8. Whoever our CM will be, hopefully it's Jack for the future if he can stay healthy. He has, at least 8 years left in him. I think he's 24, I believe. You look at our back line, Hector Bellerin, fucking 21. I mean, come on. You maybe have to go out and buy a left back next year, next summer. You look at our center halves. Yeah, Koscielny's getting up there in age. But you're looking at Gabriel, looking at Robert Holding, Callum Chambers. Callum Chambers and Robert Holding are both young, 20, 21 years old. What do we have to fucking buy next year? Nothing. You might have to plug in a few pieces here and there, but those guys are easy to find. That's when you can go out and buy a Japanese kid from the J League. That's when you can go out and buy another Robert Holding or whatever. You go out there and get those youth players that are 20, 21 who only cost like 5 to 8 million pounds. This is what I'm talking about. Looking at the big picture, looking at the future rather than looking at tomorrow, because that's the tunnel vision of Ivan Gazidis and not even Stan Kroenke because he's just out of the picture. But this is the tunnel vision of Ivan Gazidis and Arsene Wenger currently. They're not looking at the big picture. They're not looking at the future. Because if we have that team set up, we can challenge for the league every year for the next 5 years. At least, minimum. We can start challenging for Champions League now. And this is what I wish someone would just slap Arsene Wenger across the face and just say, do this. Because the fans deserve it more than anyone. Because I promise you, we go into that Liverpool game with the current squad we have right now, because let's face it, Ozil won't be back in time, Giroud won't be back in time, Koscielny won't be back in time, Sanchez won't be back in time, even though they're saying he might be, but you don't want to push him back or force him into a game when he's not fully fit. We go into that game and we lose that game, we're up. I mean, the Emirates is going to be worse than it was after that Aston Villa game before we bought Ozil. It's going to be worse. It's going to be just like last year, but worse. Worse. It's going to be toxic, where you're just going to be hearing chants of spend the fucking money and all this stuff. How much more embarrassment do we fucking need? How many more lies do we need to be told over and over again by these same people who say they love the club? Who say that they're doing the best for the club? You have to do it now because the fans deserve it. I mean, we've been sitting here patiently. Yeah, we've bought Mesut Ozil, Czech, Alexis Sanchez. But what did we hear last summer? No one was available. Well, now there's two players available within our means, within our budget. If I mean, if we have 100, we would still have 59 million fucking pounds left in cash reserves if we still bought those two players. How much money do you really need in cash reserves? Because even after this year, we can just start stockpiling money after that. Like I said, we could just plug in pieces here and there. And that's what big clubs do. They just plug pieces instead of just doing it one at a time, one at a time, one at a time. Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, Barcelona, they just plug in pieces. And when a big player is available to buy, they go out and buy them. Man City's the same way. They've adapted and taken the same strategy as a Barcelona, Real Madrid, and Bayern Munich. They spend and spend and spend up until the point to where they really don't need to spend, but when that big player is available, they do go out and spend. That's where Manchester United is right now. They're buying to the point to where, some of the last years of Fergie, he really didn't spend a whole lot of money because he didn't need to because his team was set. And this is where Arsenal needs to get to. We just can't do one at a time, one at a time, one at a time, and then looking at our cash reserves. I mean, if we don't spend any money, and I've said this time and time again, we might have an excess of like 300 million pounds sitting in the bank next summer. It's pointless to have that much cash reserve if you have no intention of buying anything. It's not like we're going to go out and build a new fucking stadium. It's not like we're going to revamp the training ground because it's still considered one of the best training grounds, if not, it's probably the best training ground in England. I mean, what's the point? What's the point of spending all this? What's the point of not spending any of this? So the lies have to stop. The promises have to come through finally. Because we deserve this.